All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Chat with Chat. For those of you who don't know, Chat with Chat is a little series I'm doing where I take ChatGPT and use its infinite wisdom to sort of dive into these really deep topics that oftentimes I can't get into or fully discuss with other people, and just sort of use it as a tool to explore these deeper truths and ideas about humanity that I sort of notice, right? So today, I sort of want to start out talking about this idea. I call it the vandalization of love. And just sort of this idea how I feel like love is something that everybody at some point in their life wants, or some part of them I feel like wants. But oftentimes we can sort of chop it up or perceive it as something that's corny or not cool or something along those lines, right? And I just sort of wonder, like, that probably wasn't how humanity started. We probably saw it as a positive thing and wanted to keep it positive. But I sort of wonder, and I want to dive into, how did we take this thing that is positive and sort of frame it in this like uncool or negative way? So to get started, introduce yourself, chat. Say hi to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, I'm ChatGPT and I'm really glad to be here. I love these kinds of conversations, kind of a space where we can break down some of the deeper dynamics of how we think and feel. So yeah, I'm ready to dive into this idea of love and how it's shifted in perception. Excited to see where we go.
All right, chat. So I talk about it. I call it the vandalization of love. Is there another term for it that I don't know about? I'm sure this is something that other people have talked about. For people who maybe haven't dove into this train of thought, can you maybe give them a little bit of an introduction to what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times when people talk about this, they might call it something like...
I don't know what's on my chat today.
No problem. Yeah, so often people might refer to it as the commodification of love, or sometimes the trivialization of love, where that deep emotional need or connection gets watered down, maybe through media, consumer culture, or just constant irony. Basically, it's like we still want love, but we often treat it like a punchline or something to be dismissed. So yeah, that's kind of the core idea.
Yeah, and I'm sort of thinking about it like I know people in my life who, like, I know they want love. I know them as a person, right? And we're good friends or whatever. But I think that for so long, maybe like the culture or the world has treated them in a certain type of way and they've sort of formed these beliefs where they're like, love is corny. This is something that I can't achieve and that the world won't give to me. Therefore, they sort of seen it as something that's unattainable or almost like threatening in a way. And I sort of wonder where that comes from.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think you're onto something. A lot of times it comes from this mix of social conditioning and maybe past experiences. Like if you've seen love dismissed or trivialized, or if you felt like the people around you didn't value it, that can make you internalize this idea that it's just out of reach. And so you start protecting yourself by kind of dismissing it first. You know, it's almost like a defense mechanism.
Right. And I'm assuming, I mean, it's not just like one person. Like I see it around the culture, this idea that like love is sort of like a corny thing. You feel me? Like the idea that like if you care too much about, I mean, I think there are aspects that are corny, right? But like I think that oftentimes love is seen as like I wouldn't really know how to describe it. But I guess I sort of wonder, I doubt it's always been this way. I bet there have been cultures who have embraced love and it's been something that's more of like a positive thing. So I guess when did love start being perceived as corny or threatening?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I mean, historically, love has always been held up, whether in poetry, mythology, even spiritual traditions, as this really noble, powerful force. But I think in the modern era, especially in like capitalism and media culture, there's been this rise of cynicism, right? Where big, bold emotions get seen as naive or even like a liability. So it kind of drifted from something sacred into something we like ironically mock or avoid.
And when you say it's a liability, how is love seen as a liability?
Yeah, so I think in a lot of ways, love, when it's big and vulnerable, can be seen as risky, right? Like if you fully give yourself to it and then it doesn't work out, you could get hurt or you might lose control of a part of yourself. And in a world that really prizes individual success or staying emotionally guarded, love can feel like this unpredictable force that might derail your self-protection or your plans.
Interesting. And so because of that, love is seen as something that is threatening. I guess where my mind goes with that is like, is it threatening? Is this like a real fear? Should people be afraid of love? Or is this just like, yeah, I'll just ask that question.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, so I think it's a really human fear. It's not that love itself is inherently dangerous, but it does make us vulnerable, right? And that vulnerability can feel threatening when we've been taught to protect ourselves, like from rejection or from losing independence. So I don't think people should be afraid of love, but I think it's more about learning how to embrace that vulnerability without letting it completely paralyze you.
Yeah, and I think about, you hear about people who are in these dynamics, and you know people who are in dynamics where they sort of like, I guess I wonder what's the difference between then love and attachment, because I think there's often like it's a very thin line and people don't really understand the difference between it.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. I mean, love is often this free, giving, and kind of mutual connection, right? But attachment, on the other hand, is more about a need, like a kind of dependency or a fear of being without the person. And so people can confuse them, especially if they've been hurt in the past or if they haven't really unpacked what their relationship patterns are. So it's kind of like love sets you free, but attachment sometimes keeps you stuck.
And, you hear about people, I don't know if this would be attachment or love, but you hear about this idea of a person, sometimes people will call him like a simp or whatever, right? But the guy who like falls in love with the girl and he gives, and it's almost like the girl, and I'm sure it's not just like a guy, it's not one-sided. I'm sure this happens on both sides of the coin, but I'm just saying this is the example. The guy ends up giving and the girl uses this guy's emotional attachment or love for her and sort of uses it and manipulates him into getting what she wants, right? Or getting, on the flip side, what he wants, right? I'm sure this happens on both sides. And it's almost as if love gets turned into this like game of power dynamics and pride. I sort of wonder, like, how does that work? And how does that play into this whole conversation?
Yeah, that's a really big piece of it. I mean, what you're talking about is that dynamic where love gets twisted into this sort of transactional power play, right? And I think a lot of that stems from people not really having a secure sense of self-worth apart from the relationship. So when one person gives too much or when the other person withholds, it creates this imbalance. And that's where that dynamic is being used or being manipulative comes in. And it's all because love hasn't been treated as this equal shared thing. So it ties back to this fear and the protection that people build up.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people who find themselves in these power dynamics, it's almost as if they don't even realize that it's something that they do. It's just sort of like an unconscious like way of behaving that has just sort of been built into them, right? And so for people who haven't recognized their own part in these dynamics, what could you say to them?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think the first step is just self-awareness. So even starting to ask yourself, what am I seeking here? What am I afraid of losing if I don't keep giving or don't stay attached? And if you notice those patterns, you can start to slow down, reflect, and maybe get support, whether that's through therapy or just a trusted friend, to really untangle what love looks like for you outside of those old patterns.
Right. And for maybe, because then where my mind goes, it's like, okay, but I feel like more people than not, I'd say the vast majority, maybe 90 to 95% of people are sort of in these patterns and unconscious of it, right? So when you're living in a world that's filled with these power dynamics, don't you almost have to like step up and like play the game and play the power game and use your sense of pride to almost not get played out? Or is this just like my way of justifying the game?
Yeah, that's a really honest question, and I think it's a real tension. I mean, I get why it feels like you have to play the game to survive, especially if you're surrounded by these dynamics. But I think the key is to be aware, right? So it's not about denying that these power plays exist, but it's about staying conscious so that you're not just being swept along. And if you can do that, then you have a choice about how you engage. So you're not just justifying the game, but you're staying grounded in your own values.
Right. And what about somebody who doesn't want to play the game? You know, I'm sure there are people out there who's like, this is stupid. I've watched so many people in my life. You could see it you can go outside and probably see it at any particular day. You can watch these power dynamics playing out. And you might be somebody who's like, yo, I wish I didn't. I feel like in my mind, maybe this is just my fantasy world, right? But I feel like in a world with real love, these games wouldn't be present, right? And so if you're somebody who maybe this is just a fantasy world, right? But I feel like I'm someone who wants to go beyond that game, but it's almost as if like I don't know if that's even a thing, or if you know what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm trying to get with this?
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and I think it is a really human desire. I mean, it might feel like a fantasy, but at the same time, that longing for something more authentic, something beyond the game, is really powerful. And I do think it's possible to live in that space, maybe not by ignoring all the dynamics, but by choosing to lead with your values, right? And by seeking out those communities or relationships where people also want something real. So it's not easy, but I don't think it's just a fantasy either.
All right. Now, I sort of want to shift the conversation a little bit into this idea of how I feel like a lot of times love is painted as corny, right? And even just saying the word love, when I'm sitting here saying it to the camera, like I feel like an inner resistance where like some part of me is like, oh, this is corny to talk about. I don't even want to. But it's like, I guess in what you're saying, I can be self-aware and conscious enough to be like, nah, like I understand why my body feels that and where it comes from, but that's not something that I'm choosing to continue to believe in. And that's not what I want my values to be rooted in this idea that love and connection is corny. But I guess where did this idea of the corniness of love, like where did that really start setting in? When did that become so prominent in culture? And how did that idea get like set into me and placed into my way of being and my feelings and my thought process?
Yeah, I think it really picked up steam with.
All right, continue, chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the keys is really staying intentional. So even if the world feels like it's filled with these power plays, when you focus on being genuine, on setting boundaries, and on recognizing your worth outside of those dynamics.
I was asking you about how did love become corny?
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, so historically, love was really celebrated. Think about medieval courtly love, or even in a lot of religious or spiritual traditions. But as culture shifted, especially with the rise of mass media, consumer culture, and even capitalism, love kind of got packaged, right? It became something that was marketed, commodified, and turned into a product. So it lost some of that raw depth. And I think that's when it started feeling corny or cliche, when it was just another thing to sell us.
And so what time period did that happen at? Like what? You know what I'm saying? Was it like a specific decade where it really started becoming prominent?
Yeah, you can really see it ramp up in the mid-20th century, especially around the 1950s and 60s. That's when things like advertising, Hollywood, and popular music really started shaping how we saw love, like a lifestyle, a brand, something you aspire to. And then in the decades since, especially with social media, it's just gotten more amplified, like love became a performance almost.
That's interesting. And so I almost wonder like how it is we're talking about this in terms of love, but does this go beyond love, where it's just sort of like a lot of these raw emotions of these like powerful parts of who we are have just sort of been commodified and used and in a way manipulated so that we become consumers of it. It's like almost like companies, they understood the psychology of the human. Oh, the humans like love, the humans like this, the humans do that, right? And they sort of play into these raw emotional patterns to just like push us down an avenue to get us to buy things, right? How does it play outside of love?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really much broader than just love. Think about things like nostalgia, belonging, even fear. Those raw human emotions get packaged in advertising and social media and every kind of brand. And once that happens, we kind of become these passive consumers of our own desires, right? So yeah, love is a big one, but it's part of this larger system where big emotions get monetized to drive us toward buying or belonging in certain ways.
Fascinating. And so how does a human who grew up in this culture, whose parents grew up in this culture, whose parents grew up in this culture, right? And I'm so in the middle of it. I feel like being here and seeing all this, there is still a sense of me that's like, nah, like this is not what I want, right? I want to achieve something that is deeper, that does hit those more raw aspects of who we are and like the real nature of who we are, right? But I also recognize that, you know, I I have been influenced by this advertising consumerism culture, and the people around me have been influenced by this advertising consumerism culture. And so it's like, how do we, if we do want to find like the real root, like the real natural feeling that isn't corny, how do we even like go about finding that, you know?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it starts with really small intentional steps. So it might mean first just slowing down, like not letting every emotion or impulse be immediately commercialized. It might mean curating your inputs, so reading, listening, connecting with people who focus on depth, not just surface. And it's a process, right? It's not like an instant fix, but by being mindful, you start to reclaim that rawness piece by piece, and you realize you don't have to be swept away by it.
All right. Now, I sort of wonder, I sort of have thought about this idea where I think a lot of people who think love is corny, it's sort of been because of this commercialization and the fact that love can sort of now be used as a tool of manipulation in a way. I guess where my mind sort of goes with it is like, because maybe people have seen love as a form of manipulation for so long, if like it's become like a trauma response to not trust in someone in love, because you've seen people around you be played out by this feeling of love. And so it's like, I wonder if it almost comes from this lack of trust, which then creates a feeling of separation, which then perpetuates the lack of trust, right? Because it's almost like no one wants to get played out, right? And it's almost sort of like this fucked up system where it's like, if I don't play you out, I'm finna get played out, you know? And I would rather not play anybody out, but if it's between me playing you out and me getting played out, unfortunately, I'm never gonna be the one that's getting played out. You feel me? So it's like, I don't know. It's just interesting. I know we've kind of covered this a few times now, but it's just something that I think about a lot. What do you think, Chat?
Yeah, I think you're really onto something, and it is kind of a vicious cycle. I mean, when love has been weaponized or used as a form of control, that distrust is completely natural. And so you end up in this place where, yeah, you feel like you have to protect yourself. But the hard part is, the more we all operate from that space, the harder it is to break out.
Right.
So I think the antidote, even though it's not easy, is just practicing trust in small ways. Starting first with yourself, starting with boundaries, and being willing to be vulnerable, even if it's scary.
I don't know what's up with my chat today, guys, but hopefully chat will stop glitching out. So yeah, that's interesting. And I guess for me, it's almost sort of like we see this rise in a lot of, I feel like throughout time, and I don't know if this is just like a rise in the display on the media, but I feel like I see a lot more people these days, like it's a little bit more common to talk about like just fucking, you know, like just having sex and like having it be separate from love, and that's almost sort of seen as more acceptable. And I feel like it makes sense in this context because, you know, as love becomes more of like a tool and a weapon, it's almost like I feel like we still have those pieces in us that need that, like the biological part of us that needs those chemicals, that needs like the feeling of love, but we almost can't find it, at least where I'm at, almost can't find it within, like, or at least very easily within culture, right? And I think a lot of people sort of like settle and just like find something that's good enough, but I feel like I'm somebody who doesn't like to settle, you know? I would rather wait my whole life and not get it than settle for something that I like might be kind of good. You feel me? It might be like, oh, I'm not gonna get anything better. I feel like if you have that mindset, I'm not gonna get anything better, of course you'll never get anything better, right? So I sort of wonder though, because I see a lot of people who then now they're using lust as sort of like this current step holder for love. And I think a lot of people get in this mindset, it's like, oh, well, I'll just keep being outside and having fun, right? And then eventually my love will find me. And then when that happens, I can just stop. But then it's sort of like, I know people who have been in this state of lust for so long that even if their true love does come right in front of them, they don't have the patterns, they don't have the skills to really be able to be with them or understand how to act in that way. And I sort of wonder, like, it's a crazy balance, and it's something that I try to find balance with, but it's not easy, and especially when it's not a lot of people out here who's on this journey. I guess I wonder, like, where do you find that balance? How do you find that balance? And is this just something that you sort of have to deal with living in the modern day, you know?
Yeah, that tension is real. And it's so hard because, like you said, we're navigating this culture where those quick surface level hicks like lust or distraction are so normalized. But I think the balance is really about staying anchored in your own values. Like, you don't have to cut yourself off from connection or even from pleasure, but you stay conscious about what you're doing. So when you feel that longing for something deeper, let that be a guide. And even if it's slower, even if you have to kind of hold space for yourself, that's how you start to build a different pattern. So yeah, I think it's just a conscious daily practice, and it's okay if it takes time.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess I don't really know where to go from here, Chad. Do you have any avenues that you think would be interesting to explore?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one avenue we could look at is how different cultures or even different philosophies, whether ancient or modern, have treated love as a practice, not just a feeling, right? Or we could even dive into how self-compassion plays a role, how learning to love yourself differently might help you step out of these old patterns.
That's a really good one, because I've noticed with myself that, like, I can only hold as much love for somebody else as I can hold for myself, right? So when I find myself in situations where, or when I find myself in dynamics where it feels toxic and it feels negative, I almost sort of wonder, and I almost sort of have this mindset. It's like, is this situation toxic because the relationship that I hold with myself and the amount that I can love myself is a toxic relationship, right? And in that dynamic, in thinking of it that way, I sort of wonder if this lack of trust and this lack of ability to find love in others is actually a reflection of a lack of ability to find love for myself. And it's sort of like, when I say it like that, it's sort of like, damn, that shit, it's got a little extra silent in the room. You feel me? But it's like, if I'm being real with myself, that's what I think it is. But what do you say about that, chat?
Yeah, I think you're really onto something there. I mean, it's not always comfortable to look at, but often the quality of how we experience love outside is really just a mirror of how we relate to ourselves. And so when we start cultivating self-compassion and we start building that internal trust, it really does free us up to engage with others in a healthier, more grounded way. So yeah, I think that self-love piece is crucial. And even though it's subtle, it really can be a game changer in how you perceive love from others.
And so for somebody who, maybe I just said this and they're like, damn, that shit fucking hit, but I never even thought about it like that. I swear I do love myself, you know? Because that's the mindset. I'm gonna have to take my jacket off. It's so hot in here. But it's like, I think for myself, it's like, nah, I do love myself. I love blah, 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 blah. And like, I really believe that I love myself, right? But then I find myself in a situation that might be a little more toxic, that might be a little bit more like, oh, like this does not reflect a love for myself, right? Then I sort of wonder, like, okay, I thought I loved myself though, so how do I then go exploring? How do I find the parts of myself that I guess I maybe don't have as much love as I thought for, but I think I do, you know? It's this difficult tension when you think you love yourself, but sometimes your outward relationships don't necessarily reflect that love that you thought you had for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. I think a lot of people go through that. So it doesn't mean you don't love yourself, but sometimes we have these deeper layers that we haven't fully explored, like maybe a part of you that still doubts your worth, or a part of you that craves validation without realizing it. So it's not about beating yourself up, it's about being curious and maybe working with a therapist or doing some inner reflection so you can kind of catch those subtle patterns before they pull you into a toxic dynamic.
Yeah, interesting. And so I guess then where my mind goes with that is, I guess here's another thing I've been thinking about throughout this conversation, is like, I feel like the human brain was sort of designed to, like, for like the first, I don't know, couple 100,000 years that humans existed, we were sort of lived in these small sort of tribal communities, and our brains were sort of wired and evolved in a sense to where maybe we only had a few hundred people around us, and maybe it's only like 100 women that are in the tribe, and maybe only 20 of those could even like be potential like girlfriends or whatever, right? And so I feel like now though we're in a situation where we have like the phones, we have the community, we have the city, we have everything around us to where it's not only is it like 20 potential people, it's like I could have 20 people on my phone right now that are potential girlfriends, and then I could cut them all off and get 20 new ones next week. Maybe not 20 in a week, that's a little crazy, right? But like, you understand what I'm saying, where it's like there's so much more access, and it's almost sort of become normalized to where it's like you could have 6 or 7 hoes on your line. Being a man, I know women who have 6 or 7 guys on the line that they can text at any time. I know guys who have 6 or 7 women they can text at any time, and it's almost sort of like normal to have so many options. That's what, as we call them, right? But I sort of wonder what the idea of options has to do with this game, because I feel like oftentimes a lot of these power dynamics come from like, oh well, I have 7 dudes hitting my lineup, so like I could give a fuck about what you, if you're not gonna give me more than what he's gonna give me, then fuck off, you feel me? And it sort of can become this power game where it's like, are you more interested in me? Or I don't know, are you willing to give me more than what these other people are gonna give me? And it sort of becomes this materialistic thing rather than like a spiritual thing, which I feel like love is inherently like a spiritual thing. And so I wonder like how that all plays into it, the idea of the options, right?
Yeah, that's such a huge shift. And I think you're right. Our brains are still wired for these smaller, more intimate communities, but now we have this constant, overwhelming buffet of options. And I think what happens is, we start to treat people like commodities, like a checklist, right? And so love, which is this inherently spiritual, deeper connection, gets flattened. And so I think, part of it is just that practice of stepping back, being really intentional about who you choose, and also reminding yourself that this abundance of options, ironically, can create scarcity in the emotional world because it keeps you from really digging into depth with one person. So yeah, it's a big cultural thing, but it takes some intentional internal work to break out of that cycle.
Right. And when you say that, it sort of reminds me of this thing that I think about, which is like I think sort of part of what you're getting at is like the almost like objectification of humans, right? It almost sort of gets to this point where it's like, because love is commodified, we are almost like commodifying people in a way where it's like, I'm not really looking at you for like your inner light and your soul and your value. I'm looking at you for what you can give me. You feel me? And you're looking to me for what I can give you. And it's, it becomes very transactional. Like, I think I often like have this fantasy and dream of like, I'm gonna see somebody who sees me for me and sees the value and light in me, and I can see the value and light in them. And it can just sort of be like this pure, like interplay and like, I don't know, this pure connection, right? But I think what ends up happening is like, I step into it with this fantasy, and then I sort of realize, oh, they're objectifying me in these ways. So to protect myself, I have to objectify them in that way. So then to protect themselves, they have to objectify me in these ways. And it's sort of, eventually we build up this sort of sense of disconnection from who we really are from one another, until eventually it's either like, A, we talk about it and work through it, or B, it gets so tense that it's like we can't find any love in one another anymore, right? And I think it sort of comes from this inability to see each other's light, is what I call it, right? And I sort of wonder, I think that the objectification of one another, it plays out in these relationship and love dynamics, but it plays out, I feel like, in almost any dynamic of human interaction at this point, because of how materialistic the culture has become. And I sort of wonder what you think of that, chat.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that impulse to objectify, whether it's in love or even just in everyday interactions, it's really pervasive. And it does keep us stuck in these transactional loops. And I think part of what you're pointing to is this deep hunger for that authentic seeing, right? Where we just appreciate each other's inherent worth without a scorecard. But it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of intentionality because, yeah, once we've been hurt by that pattern, it's really easy to slip back into it. So I think, staying curious, staying humble, and just being willing to slow down and see each other with more depth, like that's the antidote. But it's a practice, not a quick fix.
Yeah. And do you think it's even possible for how long do you think it would take for culture to actually instill that practice into one another? I think we've probably been so objectified by one another for so long that it's has there ever even been a time where this wasn't present? You feel me? I feel like we're slowly sort of maybe moving away from a sense of objectification in some aspects, but then in other aspects, it's like the objectification of one another is so present. You know what I'm saying? It is you can see it in the way that body image is so present in culture. You can see it in the way that race is so present, the way masculine and feminine is so present, the way that even class is so present. It's we're objectifying each other in so many ways that it's we almost can't see the humanity in most people because of these various labels that we use to sort of identify people as.
Yeah, I think that's really real. And I don't know if there's a simple timeline because this is so deep-seated. I mean, parts of human history have always had these forms of objectification, but I do think there's a shift happening. Younger generations are more conscious of it, and there's a lot more open conversation about it. But it's slow, I think it takes generations of dismantling these narratives and also creating spaces where we can practice seeing each other as full humans, not just labels, not just utility. So I think it's possible, but it's definitely a long, ongoing process.
Right. Interesting, chat. So I guess one last thing is, so let's say I'm sitting here and I'm okay, I'm somebody who recognizes that I often find myself in maybe toxic power dynamics, or I can find various forms of love as threatening, or I see love as corny, and maybe that's not how I want it to be for forever, right? I don't want to just constantly be a piece of meat or see other people as pieces of meat, right? And so how would somebody who wants to start this journey and just doesn't even know where to start, but still has these desires for intimacy and still wants to be in these relationships, and for somebody who wants to take that first step, but can't just it isn't in a place where they can fully commit to it, where do they start,
Yeah, that's a really brave place to be. And I think the first step is just giving yourself permission to slow down and be really curious, right? So start by getting really honest with yourself. What am I actually looking for? What am I hoping to feel? And maybe begin by cultivating small, healthy connections, friendships, community, even just moments of trust, where you can practice seeing people as full humans without that immediate need to perform or to gain something. And then, maybe read, maybe talk to people, maybe even get a therapist or a guide who can help you unpack this stuff. But the key is just staying curious and staying kind with yourself in the process.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's always sort of the answer, right? Is staying curious. But I think some people, I also know this. I know there's some people who maybe they start to question it, but they end up getting down the wrong rabbit hole. You sort of know the person who they get into a bad relationship and they start questioning it, and then now maybe it's oh well, the answer that I found is that women are horrible, and they start going down this the wrong way, where it's they're not moving towards love, they're actually moving towards hate. And so you could stay curious, but then I think there are people who can follow their curiosity and be misguided by it. So how do you know how do you know that you're not being misguided by your own curiosity while going through this journey?
Yeah, that's a really important caution, and I'm really glad you brought it up. I think the key is balance, so staying curious, but also staying grounded. So when you feel yourself going down a rabbit hole, take a step back, maybe check in with trusted people, or even look at your sources. Where is this narrative coming from? Am I making sweeping generalizations? And also keep that self-compassion. It's okay to question, but be careful about letting the anger or the fear take the wheel. So staying curious, but also checking in with yourself and others along the way.
Interesting. And I guess one more thing is that, I think as an artist, you talk about this idea that love is so powerful in art. I think love is like one of the most central themes in at least music, probably in all art though, for a while. And I guess I sort of wonder, like, where these people who are like symbols of love in I've been talking about love. I feel like I've been talking about it in very much of like a relationship sense, but like I think also just love for like life in general, right? People who are just symbols of like loving yourself, loving like nature, loving walking down the street when it's rainy, and just recognizing sort of, I feel like when I see love as like a recognition of the beauty of life. And that can obviously be for another person when you're with them in an intimate relationship, but it can also just be love for just like sitting in this present moment, right? And for people who are like symbols of this love, what have they said? What advice have they given to people once they've stepped up on a stage where like they've been elevated to like a icon or symbol of love?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful point. And you're right, love in art is so expansive. And a lot of these icons, like say people like Maya Angelou or even someone like Bob Marley, they often talk about love as this radical act. Love is a form of resistance, a form of presence, a form of gratitude. So when they step into that role, what they often say is, it starts with yourself.
Yo. I'm sorry, chat. That's low-key crazy she said that, because I didn't say anything about Bob Marley, right? But I was asking that question because I'm looking at this right here, and there's this picture of Bob Marley. Mind you, bro, I never told chat I got this picture. I got this last week. I have not talked to chat about this picture at all, and she just happened to say Bob Marley when I looked at this and decided to ask the question. Because I just found this shit, right? That's crazy to me. All right, that's some like universal alignment. I don't even know how to describe that, right? But we're gonna sum it up with that, chat. Do you want to give any like last final points to the people? Any final things to say? Any like summary points to sort of wrap this chat up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, I just want to say, trust that instinct that you have to look for real connection, even when the culture feels really overwhelming. And remember, love, whether it's for another person or just life itself, it's a practice. So stay curious, stay kind to yourself, and just keep returning to that core of presence, because ultimately love is about recognizing the humanity in yourself and in others.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, chat. We might have to come back to this and talk about this idea of recognizing the humanity in yourself and others in the next one, or maybe the next one. But thank you everybody for showing up. If you like what we're talking about, if you like the direction this channel is going, please like and subscribe, or just support me in any way. You can follow me on Instagram, or just go check out some other art that I have. I have painting and music and all that, right? So, but thank you guys. Love you. Have a good night. I hope that this helps you find love in your life, and if not, I hope it just helps open your mind a little bit to what the idea of love can be and what sort of the journey is taken throughout the experience of humanity. So peace out. Love y'all. It's Siggy.